I don't think you can live in Oregon and not somehow have a love affair with lighthouses. There are lots and lots of books about lighthouses. I have a friend named Jim Gibbs. He wrote a number of books about lighthouses. He was considered the expert on lighthouses up and down the West Coast. Jim actually spent time on a lighthouse like this called Tillamook Head. Then he built his own lighthouse just south of Yachats. Jim died in 2010. But over my years at KEZI, I think I did 2 or 3 stories on Jim. I found one recently, thanks to the Archives Department over at the University of Oregon. I want to show that story to you because every time I drive south of Yachats and I look over, I still see Jim's light. On tonight's Oregon People segment, a trip to the coast. Many of us are fascinated by lighthouses. Have you ever driven by that lighthouse near Yachats? It looks like it's part of a man's home. Well, it is. But it's also a working, registered lighthouse. Watch.
This was my dream from the time I was a young man, from the time we first came down to the coast in the 1920s, that someday I would have my little so-called castle on the edge of the Oregon shores.
Here on the cleft of the rock, nestled in the shadow of Cape Perpetua, 71-year-old Jim Gibbs found a dark spot to build what has become a light for many. He noticed on some old maps that Cape Perpetua was earmarked for a lighthouse. The government never built it, so Gibbs did it himself.
Lighthouses have always been kind of a homing pigeon for the seafarer, so to speak, and they have a special purpose, and they mean something different to everybody. A lighthouse is kind of a human symbol of the light shining always the brightest in the darkest places.
The rotating light is officially registered with the Coast Guard and must be lit from sunset to sunrise every day of the year.
It's kind of a symbol in a way, because lighthouses are in the twilight of age to navigation, so to speak, in this high-tech electronic age in which we live. But they still have a warmth, and they still are very much admired by the general public. And I think there'll always be lighthouses, even though their importance has been reduced.
Gibbs knows how important lighthouses were to seafarers of the past. In 1945 and 46, he was a lighthouse keeper on one of the most lonely, isolated lighthouses in the country, Tillamook Rock near Seaside.
It was an experience all of its own, because it was suddenly like going to a prison. In fact, when I was out there, it was called the Little Alcatraz of Oregon. And in later years, news people dubbed the name Terrible Tilly.
To Jim, Tilly was not all that terrible. In fact, he learned to love her and what she stood for. You can see by his home that this maritime writer never has been able to break off his love affair with the sea.
Well, it's kind of like having old friends. I mean, each one of them means something personally to you, and they all have a story connected with them. And the nice thing about nautical things, they never talk back to you. You can just reminisce with them.
Gibbs spends a lot of time reminiscing with the old 18th and 19th century technology, most of it obsolete. But he still salvages pieces like these old lighthouse lenses.
These all have hand-ground polished glass, and each one has a different configuration because they all refract and reflect into one central band.
Each one spent many years guiding ships along the rocky Pacific coastline. Reason enough for Gibbs to save it, reason enough for people to remember. Gibbs spent his whole life writing about the sea. Not a bad job writing about something you love so much, especially when it's as powerful as the ocean. The sea is filled with mystery and intrigue for this man. The lighthouse and the rock it's built on don't stop the storms from beating the coastline, but they do provide protection, security, and a solid foundation for many, including Jim Gibbs. Maybe that's why he calls this place his Cleft of the Rock.
Cleft of the Rock comes from a passage in the Bible in Exodus, which tells about Moses being hid in the cleft of the rock when God passed by. It's also from the hymn, which says, "He hideth my soul in the cleft of the rock." I just give all the credit to the good Lord because I've had a blessed life, so to speak, and it's kind of terminated in exactly what I had planned from the beginning, and He allowed it to be.
So the next time you drive along Highway 101 south of Yachats and you are admiring that light and being warmed by the romance lighthouses stir in all of us, you might remember Jim Gibbs for this very special gift he's given all of us.
And tomorrow night, two fascinating women. We were introduced to them while on a trip to Brownsville, and we were so impressed with what they did and what they had to say that we ended up doing a story on them. So
I'd ask you what that is, but it's a surprise.
It's a tease. We can't tell it until tomorrow.